7:30 in the morning. It's a Monday. I know. September 30th. Last day of September? Can you what? October starts tomorrow? Crazy. Well, it doesn't feel like it over much of the country. However, there are some exceptions. I'm looking at you, Montana, Idaho, uh, Washington, and Oregon, with yes, freeze warnings in effect. Kind of crazy. We have red flag warnings as you get down the coast of Oregon and Northern California. And then further down the coast into California, it's heat advisories there. So be advised it's going to be hot along the coast of California. You get further inland and it's excessive heat watch and warnings here with very hot temperatures continuing for southern Arizona along the Colorado River into southern California. But then we go back into the northern plains. We have a cold front coming, and with that, some wind. It's been dry, it's been very warm. And so, we have red flag warnings up. That's a high fire danger along with that wind, all the way from Wyoming into Nebraska, South Dakota, North Dakota, Montana, into Minnesota. And the brown gets you into wind advisories up there. So be advised it's going to be windy. Then we get down into the southeast, lots of fog, Mississippi, Alabama, Tennessee, parts of Arkansas, all the way down there in South Florida. We still have heat advisories for the Miami area. Still some flooding concerns, rivers, Florida, Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina into Tennessee. And then it's just outright flood watches and flood warnings into Virginia and West Virginia. And there's a little bit of fog up there in New York State. So that's kind of what's going on today as far as the extremes. Here's what's going on the surface. And we do see that front moving through South Dakota, North Dakota. And with that, lots of wind. And with that, a critical fire danger for South Dakota and Nebraska because it's just so dang warm and dry. We haven't had rain here pretty much all month. Very little rain for the month of September for Nebraska, Iowa, South Dakota, depending on where you are. But I know Omaha is reporting the least amount of rain in a September on record. I think it's under 2/10. So anyway, you get the idea. Very dry and also very warm. We'll show you that here in a second. Meanwhile, our low on the East Coast. If you watched football yesterday, the Jets played in a mess in New Jersey. The rain started in the second half there for Baltimore. And that's where the rain is again still today along the mid-Atlantic into parts of the Northeast, kind of centered around D.C. or just south of that, Virginia, into West Virginia where the heaviest rain will be. Flash flooding possible here, and then just scattered showers throughout that whole area. And your temperature anomalies, this is what I was talking about for the plains. I mean, just really hot. Now, getting cooler behind the front. So that is good. Some relief coming for South Dakota, North Dakota, Montana, Wyoming, where temperatures were like 30 degrees above average yesterday, knocking back down to just a couple few degrees below average. So close to average for today after being so dang hot. But you look where I live in western Iowa, we're 15, 20 degrees above average today with the wind picking up ahead of the front. 20 degrees above average for parts of Minnesota, all the way down through Kansas. And so it's still hot for parts of the plains, but that cold front's going to give us some brief relief. And then the other slightly below average is where our rain is expected into Virginia, West Virginia, parts of Pennsylvania there. These are the actual temperatures. This is how it translates into today's highs. 92 Omaha. Now, thankfully, we're 5 to 10 degrees cooler, even just an hour away here in western Iowa. So it's only going to be mid 80s today, but still going to be pretty warm. We're still talking upper 80s, near 90 for Kansas, down into Oklahoma, and down into Texas. Really hot for the desert Southwest. My friends in Phoenix are tired of it. I get it. Fall comes late in southern Arizona. 103 today in Phoenix. It's been particularly brutal this year, however. And then even up and down the coast of California, 90s. Cooling off, though, Pacific Northwest, 70s for the Willamette Valley, 60s when you get to the other side of the Cascades, 50s when you get into Montana, Wyoming. And again, freezing temperatures by tomorrow morning for this morning and tomorrow morning for parts of, say, northwest Montana into the Idaho Panhandle. These are low temperatures, low-ish temperatures. So these are temperatures around 6 a.m. Central Time. So it's like 4 a.m. West Coast. So these aren't even the lows all the way, but close. And then so starting the day in the 40s now for the northern plains into the upper Midwest, which is much better behind that front. But ahead of the front, 60s and even 70s to start the day. All right, surface for tomorrow, that front does make progress further into the Midwest and further south in the plains, clearing Kansas, most of Missouri into Illinois. Ahead of the front, scattered showers still with that lingering moisture. So mid-Atlantic up through the Northeast and back towards the Midwest into the Tennessee valleys where we see our scattered showers, and then even some rain there in northwestern Washington. Temperature anomalies tomorrow. I really like these maps. Now, please sound off in the comments on what you'd like to see or whether you like these or don't like these. But here's what we look for temperature anomalies tomorrow. So again, 15, 20 degrees above average, say for where I am in Iowa today. Tomorrow, about average, upper 60s. And then where our low is and where the rain is centered around DC, that's where we see those temperatures below average. And then way up there in northwestern Washington, pretty well above average for California, especially along the coast. And even still for southern Arizona, 11, 12 degrees above average for Tucson and Phoenix, respectively, 98 to 105 for Tucson and Phoenix, respectively, tomorrow. 80s and 90s for Texas, but up into the central plains, northern plains, you have 70s transitioning into 60s. And that's the story for Nebraska, mid-70s, but then into Iowa, 60s. And 60s also into Wisconsin and Minnesota into the Great Lakes. So that cold front making a difference. But behind it, further behind it, where the cool off is yesterday and today, now warming back up tomorrow, mid-70s, even some 80s returning to South Dakota and to Montana. So it's a short-lived cool off. All right, surface for Wednesday. That cool front making further eastward progress. Ahead of that is where we see our rain. Some scattered storms. Showers and storms for Florida into Louisiana. Some cold air hanging around the Canadian border in the northern plains, and then also in the Pacific Northwest, behind that front, kind of cool, with some snow showers perhaps for the northern Cascades. Your anomaly temperatures on Wednesday, the heat returning to the plains, now back to 20 degrees above average for the central plains, and still hot for California. Southwest cooling off a little, but still above average. Slightly below average along the Canadian border for Montana up into the Pacific Northwest. Slightly below average for Pennsylvania and New York State. But these temperatures are close to average. I mean, the hot stuff really is the Central Plains through the Intermountain West back towards the West Coast. And here's how those highs look. We see plenty of hundreds in Central California. 102 for Redding. Ouch. 104, I think that's Bakersfield. 102 for Phoenix. So really hot here. 90s for Kansas, return, and Oklahoma and Texas, although upper 80s for West Texas, kind of nice. But you get into the Midwest, and it's that cool off right behind the front is there. So 70s widespread here, Illinois, Indiana, Ohio, Kentucky, Tennessee. Pretty nice. Mid-Atlantic, low 80s transitioning into the 70s and even 60s as you get into Pennsylvania and New York State and further to the north and east. All right, let's take a look at our GFS model for this morning. And as we go through time, we're going to once again answer that question. Virginia, is there really going to be a hurricane by next weekend? Spoiler alert, according to the GFS, I don't think so. which is good. And now, it's not the final word yet. We have to get there. And so we'll see how things develop, or if things develop. But right now, it's not looking like a repeat performance by the end of this weekend into the weekend for as far as a hurricane goes. Now, this is today. 18Z minus 6 is 12. I think we're minus 5 during daylight time. So anyway, 1 o'clock in the afternoon, perhaps Central Time. Early afternoon, we'll just call it. And we see those showers mid-Atlantic into the Ohio River Valley, into Pennsylvania. That's really where the rain is. Now we see our wind here. See those isobars really close together. So lots of wind for the northern plains. And you see the 540 line. If there was rain and snow here, this would be the demarcation between rain and snow. So this is cooler air coming down into the plains, and that's why it's cooler up here. But it's not making a lot of southward progress as this low tracks, eastward across Canada. The cool air just kind of skirting along the Canadian border, invading a little bit, but not getting too far south. So that's why we're getting such a brief cool off with this front. All right, as we go through tonight, a few showers lingering mid-Atlantic. We got heavy rain up here, Vancouver Island into British Columbia, and that's pretty heavy snow for the Rockies into British Columbia and Alberta. But again, staying mostly on the Canadian side. We see our front here. See this little dip. This is the cooler air trying to get not making too much southward progress, but cooling off in Michigan, and that front is pushing some showers ahead of it right along the eastern Great Lakes. But again, mostly on the Canadian side. So everything's staying well north as far as the activity goes. We're not seeing any hurricanes here by Wednesday, really no signs of that. Maybe a little increase in tropical moisture, but look how quiet it is across the country. You know what that means? That means very few clicks on the weather mic and not a lot of people watching. And we're such a tiny channel, we're trying to grow. You hate it because you have a Hurricane Helene, and so there's increased interest, and all of a sudden you have 200 people watching your video, which you kind of get excited about that. But then, we get back to boring weather and it's back down to 30, 40 people, which I'm still grateful for. Don't get me wrong. It's just, when you're a small channel, it's just hard to get traction. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a lot of clickbait the rest of this week. I'm kidding. I'm kidding. All right. Here we go. Wednesday. This is noonish. And we do see some increased moisture in the Gulf midday Wednesday, and maybe even some showers popping up here and a low forming. But, tropical moisture, we're not talking a tropical storm here or hurricane at all. This is just increased moisture for southern Louisiana, moving into Mississippi, Alabama, Florida Panhandle, and just kind of hanging around the coast. But again, some increased showers, some increased moisture. This is Friday as we go through the day. No hurricanes here. And GFS has been pretty consistent, not bringing a hurricane in now for the last couple of days, even though it kind of hinted at one earlier in the week. Now, we do see, again, more activity here, and definitely more, thunderstorms, more showers, more moisture, and this low does move, again, into the Gulf Coast area, but not hurricane strength. It doesn't even look like tropical storm strength. Just looks like some heavy rain for some places that don't need it as we get into, we're already here on the 8th of October now, and just watching this low and just how quiet everything else is. So quiet. And it's going to be warm and it's going to be dry for much of the country. So, we like to give you the forecast into whatever the next weekend is. Thanks to our weather consultants back in the TV days, where I would not be wearing my hat backwards or showing up to work without a shower. Here are your anomalies for Saturday. Yeah, this is going to be hot again. Northern Plains, Central Plains, even parts of the Southern Plains. We're talking 10 degrees above average from Lubbock to 30 degrees above average for Western North Dakota. Just brutal. And above average for the entire West Coast, 10 to 15 degrees above average for at least for the western 2/3 of the country. The only places near average, you get into the Midwest, say Tennessee, Kentucky, Ohio, Pennsylvania, New York State, like 1 to 2 degrees below average. And then, Florida, with the increased rain threat, I suppose, is, maybe 10 degrees below average, but just hot across the country. How hot? Yeah, still above 100. Desert Southwest, still above 100. Parts of Central California, 80s for the Willamette Valley, although 79 Portland, round up 80. 70s as you get a little further inland, but upper 70s for this time of year for Eastern Oregon, Eastern Washington is, you could almost call it Indian summer here. A definition of Indian summer is that really summer-like weather after a freeze or after a frost. And so you might qualify for parts of Eastern Oregon, Eastern Washington, Northwestern Montana, into Idaho. I mean, very warm temperatures after a freeze. And then you get into the plains and much warmer. So again, Saturday's highs back into the upper 80s, low 90s for the Central Plains into the Northern Plains. Although pretty nice for the Midwest and very nice for the Northeast with temperatures in the 60s there. Sunday, do we cool off? No. No, we don't. No, it gets hotter across the northern and central plains. Oh my goodness, 31 degrees above average, Hastings, Nebraska. What does that look like temperature-wise? Well, 100. It should be 70 or 67. So you get the idea. Very warm temperatures, especially across the plains. But still warm. West Texas, upper 80s. East Texas, low 90s. But we do see temperatures dropping off as you head east into the southeast. 70s by the time you get to Georgia. Not too bad. Mid-Atlantic, 70s. Then we see some 60s. Pennsylvania, New York State, Vermont, New Hampshire. So pretty nice here. Hot in the west, southwest especially, but warm for Oregon. Mid to upper 70s for the Willamette Valley is actually pretty pleasant. All right, 6 to 10 day temperatures. Any trend differences? No. The whole country. This is the 4th through the 8th. Above average temperatures and below average precipitation, except for the southeast, where we see all that moisture coming in over the next couple weeks. And above average precipitation chances drop off as you head north, but still above average temperature chances for precipitation. Now I want to go back to the GFS, and let me just move quickly through the rest of the map because I want to show you this. As we get towards the end of this run, now remember, the further out we get on a computer run, the less certainty there is. But I just want to look at these trends because there's a little snowstorm dropping in here mid-October. And so we see some cold air coming in around the 12th, so a couple weeks away, and a lot of snow up here, James Bay and Hudson Bay. But the cooler air coming in behind that, and then we see colder air for the Great Lakes. This is the 14th. So again, we're more than a couple weeks out. Oh no, it jumped on me. And then as we get further into the month, because I already did this once, here we go. Look at this piece of energy dropping south on the 15th. Snow in Montana and snow into Wyoming, snow into Colorado and the Dakotas. And that's the end of the run. And you see how tight these isobars are with the cold air and maybe a snowstorm by mid-October. Until then, it's going to be like this. Yeah, like that. Warm and dry. So expect fake news, false headlines, and clickbait for your thumbnails so I can get some views this week. Just kidding. Thank you for tuning in. Really appreciate you. I'm going to keep going because I love the weather, and if you're watching and if you're still here, chances are you either love the weather or you love me or both. And I don't know what the odds of that are. But I appreciate you being here, and we'll do it again tomorrow. Thanks for tuning in, the Weather Mike.